Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Soul's Kitchen podcast. My name is Lisa Wilby, and today I'm so happy to welcome Gary Weeks, who is a local Fredericton fine arts and commercial photographer. So, welcome, Gary.
Hello. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, how are
Thanks for
you?
having me.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. So happy to talk to you. So, photographer, fine arts, and commercial. So, welcome to Fredericton. I know that you are not from Fredericton, so you want to tell everyone sort of where you're from and then how you got started in photography.
I am originally from London, England, born
Mm.
in South London, a South Londoner by birth,
Hmm.
and I lived there until I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And then my family decided, mum and dad decided that America was the place to be. So they took me, my two older sisters, and younger brother across the pond, and we ended up in New York, where my father's family lived.
Okay.
And I loved New York to visit, but I could never really call it home. And so I was there for 10 years. And at the age of 24, decided that I'd return back to England. And my green card allowed me to leave the country for just under a year. If I left it for longer than a year, I'd lose the green card. So the plan
Hmm.
was I was going to go to England and try and find some work in photography. But
Okay.
I'll go back a little bit.
Okay.
So, um, so I started off as an artist. I loved drawing and painting, and I felt that it was something that I could pursue, but I never took it seriously. I painted album covers on the backs of jackets. I did a little bit of graffiti, but only in books, never on walls. And I was I'm a great copier, but not a great free thinker when it comes to
Hmm.
painting and drawing. So when I was in America, I was able to, at first, at the age of 16, attend as an elective a photography course. That was a high school course,
Hmm.
and I suddenly just got hooked from it being just a simple take a series of 12 pictures and print them and present them. All of a sudden, it opened up a world of magic to me, and so that world of magic was something that I clung on to. And I worked as a store manager in a camera store. And then
Mm.
from the camera store in New York, I went and worked in a studio just on the recommendation of a friend. He had an uncle that knew of a studio downtown. They had an opening for an assistant. And it was one of those moments that I'll never forget, that when it was a commercial studio that presented the sort of work that you see on your in your driveways, the Canadian
Okay.
tires
Right.
and things of that nature. As soon as we opened up the doors, all of a sudden it was like those pearly gates where everything was just wonderful. And there I knew I was hooked, and photography was going to be my thing for as long as I could make it.
Wow. Okay.
So I stayed in a New York studio, learning everything from tabletop photography, we call them back shots over there,
Hmm.
to room sets, and then I finally ended up on the fashion floor. And the
Oh,
fashion
okay.
floor was fantastic because it wasn't high fashion, although we had moments where we did a better work. It was
Hmm.
sort of commercial fashion.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
one of the things I noticed back then was that the still life guys, as we called them, they
Hmm.
could not speak to people. And there was a one tale that I always tend to tell is that one day we were photographing a bed, a room set with a bed in there. The model that we had was wearing what we call a nightgown. And I always try to ask people a distinction between nightgown and negligee. And this particular model was wearing a nightgown. But the photographer behind the camera found it so difficult to speak to a live person. I was wondering what was going on.
Hmm.
And so, as an assistant, I was always looking at where I would be. And back then, I realized that working with people is my thing. So, when I got the opportunity
Okay.
to go down to the fashion floor, one of 7 floors in the building, the fashion floor was perfect for me
Awesome.
because I love people. I love talking to people, interacting with people. I did not like the world of fashion so much, but I started shooting fashion for a little bit.
Mm.
And then when I was sort of after being at this company for 3 years, almost 4 years, I decided it was time to go back to England.
Hmm.
And so at 24, as I was saying, I took the big leap of faith and decided to leave home with a suitcase, head to England, and live with my aunt and my cousins up
Hmm.
there. As I said, the idea was that I was only going to stay 1 year. If I
Right.
didn't find any work in the industry, then I would return home to America, to New York, and start my life there.
Hmm.
But then after 8 months of nothing, I was working as a security guard. I just got there at the beginning of a recession and the Gulf War.
Hmm.
At the end of 8 months, I was able to get a job in a camera store. And I then made the decision to stay in England and not return back to New York. And it was
Okay.
a bit of a surprise to my family, but it was something that I had to do. And
Okay.
we got it in place.
So how did you get here?
So I just came and took a flight. I visited England a couple of times as a 17, 18-year-old traveling.
Hmm.
But when I decided to come to Canada,
Hmm.
it was because when you said there, I forgot where I was.
Sorry, right, Canada. Yeah, I should make it, yeah, obvious.
Um,
Not everyone knows where we're at.
what made me come to Canada was I met a Canadian girl, and we
There
fell
you
in
go.
love, and we had kids. We have three wonderful daughters, and then we came to. She lived in Fredericton, where we're,
Okay, and you met her in England?
and we met in
You met
England.
in
We
England.
had mutual
Okay.
friends that worked in the camera store that we both
Okay.
worked. So we went to a work stew, and I saw her, she saw me, and then we got together. And then we lived in England together. We had three kids
In
and then
England. Wow. Okay.
three daughters.
Hmm.
And then we decided that England was not the place for us to raise our family.
Hmm.
And her family were in Canada, in Fredericton,
Hmm.
or at that time in Harvey. My family were in New York. So instead of taking one trip a year for 2 weeks and rushing around to see as many people as possible,
Hmm.
felt that it would be easier for both of us to be closer to our parents. Her parents, as I said, were in Fredericton.
Hmm.
My parents were in New York, and so it was a good trip. It was a good idea to move when we
To
did.
be in one place. Yeah. Okay. And did you think at the time about when you were moving to Fredericton about what you'd love to do and how you would do it here?
I came blind. I'm not one of these
Okay.
guys that really plan to fastidiously.
Hmm.
The idea was that we were planning to come to Fredericton when the kids 2 years before we actually did,
Hmm.
and we were just going to come with say £16,000
Okay.
and start a life.
Start. Yeah.
And then we realized that no, this is not the way to do it. So we
Okay.
bought property, we converted that property, renovated that property, and we got a really good selling price for it, which
Nice.
gave us the opportunity to buy a place and start with a little bit of a buffer.
Hmm.
My idea as a photographer, I always knew I was going to be a photographer because I started my business in England. And although it was a small fledgling business, I knew it was something that I would like to do,
Hmm.
or at least attempt to do in Fredericton.
Right.
So I brought all my office along. We brought photographs. We brought no furniture. We stayed at she's now my ex-wife,
Hmm.
my wife's sister's house for the first 2 or 3 months that we were
Hmm.
here before we bought our own. And we just started off with very little. And now I've got too much.
Right. Okay. So your photography then starting. How did that come about here? I know you've already started it. I meant like what because you've been exhibited at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's been a grind, if I have to be really
okay. Well, no,
honest with you.
that's what I want to find out.
Yeah, I started off with doing work for the Playhouse.
Okay.
I applied for a position. I spoke to a wonderful outreach coordinator at the time. She's no
Hmm.
longer in town, and she trusted me enough to allow me to take pictures.
Mhm.
So I started off with just photographing bands and performers coming into the
Mhm.
playhouse. And it was a good gig. It wasn't a great paying gig, but it was a good gig
Right.
uh, to start me off. Took some wonderful pictures, worked with some wonderful artists, but it was always a sort of fly on the wall approach of photography. I was just there to record. I was not there to do portraits or do anything
Mhm.
I'm doing currently. I was also able to land a position with the Center for Arts and Technology, which was a trade, a college in Fredericton,
Mhm.
dealt with 2D, 3D animation, uh, interior design, as well as a photography and art program.
Okay.
So I was there as the head instructor or the lead instructor, which eventually became the head department head.
Mhm.
And so that gave me income, but we were still living a lot of the time off of our savings.
Okay.
And so with my meager wage, my wife's income, we managed to get through.
Okay.
And so as I started doing more and more work, small jobs, a few weddings there, a few
Mhm.
portraits there, a few event commissions there, the work started to grow by word of mouth. And it wasn't until maybe 10 years, 12 years into the business, because I came here in 2007, 10, 12
Okay.
years into the business, things started to really move. And
Right.
that movement really came from just me being everywhere and doing sort of every job. In England, you're sort of, and in the States to a great degree, you're there to specialize and do only one type of photography.
Okay.
And so when I was there, I was a portrait photographer,
Mhm.
and so I changed that to become a people photographer, where it would be all encompassing. I would be able to do portraiture, I would be able
Mhm.
to do families. But then
Mhm.
when I came to Fredericton, I became this multifaceted photographer, and I
Mm.
was starting to do every sort of job. I worked a lot. I volunteered for the FSPCA, and I still volunteer with them after 10 years,
Okay.
photographing their Santa and their Easter, and so every now and again their Halloween pet shoots.
Okay.
I tried to do a little bit of pet photography, but I don't have the patience.
Okay.
And so I
Wow.
moved away from that. And I did architectural, I did portraiture, weddings, you name it, I've done it in
You've
French.
done it.
And
That's really amazing because I think, I just the word that comes to my mind is obviously perseverance. It's something that you love to do and you were determined you're going to do it.
well, that's the thing. Everything I've done since I was 18 has been around for photography.
That's really impressive.
And I've struggled with the best of them. I've excelled with the
Mhm.
with the best of them.
Mhm.
But I've enjoyed being in photography since day one.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you want to talk about some of I, your exhibits sort of on are you on the other end of the grind, Gary? I guess that's what I want to know.
No, I'm still
No,
grinding
you're still grinding. Okay.
because I would say I'm still grinding for the simple fact that the work's gotten bigger and the work's gotten
Okay.
better. I work with
Okay.
corporations now, and I work with companies such as Horizon, Service
Okay.
NV, and so the jobs have gotten bigger, and there's more pressure on the jobs. But you're
Right.
still waiting for the next job.
Okay. Gotcha.
But while waiting for the next job, I
Mhm.
decided that in 2015, I'd start doing my own work, which was my
Mm.
own fine art work. And so
Right.
I set myself a goal that I would do a solo exhibition, one a year for however many years. So my first exhibition was in Fredericton Library, and it
Mhm.
was called History on the Hands. If you look over this
Yes.
post,
Yes.
and it was an exhibition which I chose 14 people to photograph. And the idea was that everybody who wears rings, I don't have any rings on, but everybody who wears rings tends to know the history of each and every ring. whether
Mm.
that's found, given, lost, and
Oh, I
so,
love that.
and so the idea was to get these stories on camera. So I did these. I took these really almost. There's a famous Canadian photographer called Yusuf Kash.
Mm-hmm.
So they were sort of Kash-like portraits, and then
Okay.
I printed them up to 2 foot by 3 foot in size, and then I gave the pictures back once they were mounted to the individuals for them to
Oh,
write the story of the rings directly on the print. And so it was one of those opportunities that I would involve the sitter in more ways than just their face, their visage.
okay.
And so that sort of set the tone for the type of work that I wanted to do. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to work with non-traditional framing.
Mm-hmm.
So I make my own frames and I present the work as I feel it should be presented, as it being related to the work itself, for the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I gave these pictures, when I got these pictures back from those individuals,
Mm-hmm.
then I was able to present them in the library, and it was great for the library because it was multifaceted. You had the images, which were strong, and then you
Mm-hmm.
had the words, which were written by the individuals. Some were writing in French, some were writing in Swahili, the majority were writing in English. Some, like these interviews, some would get really involved and really tell the
Mm-hmm.
heartfelt story about their rings, and then others would be a bit more wary of sharing, and that was the beauty of the exhibition,
So were these? Sorry, they were written right on the photograph.
right on the
What
photographs.
what did you use, or what did they use to write? Did you have a
I handed
specific?
them a set of pens,
Okay.
oil paint markers, oil paint
Mhm.
markers, and
Okay.
they got to choose the color. The only thing I told them to do was leave a little space in the bottom corners,
Hmm.
my signature and for
Hmm.
their signature, and
Hmm.
go to
And
town.
that was it. Wow, that sounds so interesting.
So I love that, and that sort of set the tone. I started
Hmm.
getting a little bit of press for doing that, and I was a little bit surprised at the press. And as I said before, before we started, I'm a little wary of talking on camera and talking in general, although I love
Right.
to talk. And so, as I said, from that, I wanted to do an exhibition a year.
Mm.
So
Okay.
that particular exhibition, History of Welfare, coincided with an exhibition called Icescapes, which was something that I had done while at home we used to live in New Maryland.
Okay.
And these were my first encounters with really freezing cold winters that we
Hmm.
are experiencing now.
Right.
And so I was taking blocks of ice or chunks of ice from around the neighborhood and bring them back to my family home garage, which
Hmm.
was cold, and then I would make all these little scenes that were reminiscent of icebergs and frozen tundra,
Hmm.
and it kept me sane for that first winter
Winter.
that we
Wow.
experienced. So I'd done that, and then all of a sudden I started getting the bug. And the bug was basically that I would do an exhibition a year. So I
Right.
started at the Fredericton Library, and
Hmm.
then I moved on to the Charlotte Street Arts Center in their
Hmm.
gallery. And the Penny Gallery allowed me to show work that I called detritus automotive, which
Okay.
was simply still life shots of things that I found in my local garage mechanics
Okay.
garage. Basically, it's a Ma and Pa uh, mechanic out of
Okay.
a charter settlement. And I asked them one day while I was there, could I set up a little studio there? And so they're fixing cars in one part of
Hmm.
the showroom, and then I'm on the other part, and they're taking out engines and greasy oil guns and things
Right.
of that nature. And then I to sort of keep it all together, I
Mm-hmm.
went to Best Metals and started digging through their boxes of metal and junk.
Mm-hmm.
And I started finding signs and street signs and all these other
Wow.
materials. And so they became my second sort of big exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
And again, well received. Not as much press because I wanted it to be quieter because it was
Mm-hmm.
a venue. But then that led to another exhibition, which was me playing with insects. And
Okay.
oh, sorry, this one was skull and bones. So instead of
Skull and
using
bones.
the
Okay.
gallery, I was using animal skulls that I picked up from the Hugh John Fleming
Oh,
um,
okay.
uh, Forestry Center
Mm-hmm.
here in Fredericton. And funny story with that, I go in there first with a group of students, and I see out the corner of my eye that they've got all these skeletons of animals.
Wow.
And so a couple of years later, I go there and ask, can I photograph your skulls? And I always get this strange, and it's a look that I recognize and I'm familiar with and comfortable with. And so people always look at me.
Because yeah, you've been coming up with these really interesting projects.
And so they gave me a big box of animal skulls, which I just walked around,
Mm-hmm.
walked through the building with them,
Mm-hmm.
and photographed them. And then I went to what was it? Bucks Unlimited, and they've got a moose head in their lobby,
Mm-hmm.
and they wouldn't allow me to take the moose head home. So I brought my equipment to
Mm-hmm.
the venue and photographed the moose head in situ. And that was an interesting one. And again, that was presented on sort of plywood.
Okay.
And as a base, I used plaster of Paris, and I made these plaster of Paris molds that I would then present the pictures on.
Oh
So
wow.
again, very non-traditional, very time expensive,
Right.
but at the same time, it's what I like to do. I like playing around, and I always search for perfection, but then when I get too close to perfection, I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, it was always going to be smooth, and then one day something broke,
Right.
and I loved the cracks, and I loved the movement, and I loved the mistakes that were part of the work.
Right.
So now I look at work, and I like showing that it's done with someone's hands.
Mm-hmm.
So the work has changed some over the years, and there are times when it's clean, and it's sharp, and it's crisp. But then there's times when it's sort of hand stitched,
Right.
which leads us to the big exhibition that I did, or my first big exhibition, which was
Right.
at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2022, during COVID, I was given the opportunity to be the first Black solo artist from New Brunswick to show at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery.
Amazing. Yes.
Always something that I felt with a little humility. I really shouldn't have been the first,
Right.
because of the Beaverbrook's been there for 62 years,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time, although it was not known to me at the time, there's been a Black population in New Brunswick for over 200 years.
Right.
But it was an opportunity that I wanted to have.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad that I had. And so I work with a lot of local individuals. I like the collaboration. I like the fact that we share ideas and we can sort of get inspiration from each other. So this time I've got a neighbor, my next door neighbor is a wonderful guy called David Perno. He's a fellow Brit. So when we first
Okay.
moved in, we got along straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And so he shares a similar story. He met a Canadian, and she brought him over as my Canadian ex-wife brought me over.
Right.
He's also an ex-professional boxer, and now a boxing coach.
Right. Okay.
So before COVID, I was asking him if I would get the opportunity to photograph. And he said, yes, come on down. But at that time, work was busy and I wasn't able to.
Hmm.
So during COVID, as I started going more and more crazy, I thought, what can get me out of this
Hmm.
mindset?
Right.
And so when we went to Yellow, I decided to ask him again, and his group of guys, there were 4 or 5 guys at that time,
Hmm.
they were just starting to get back in the gym. They had one session of sparring, and now they were going to have their second. So before COVID, I went to the gym, and it was clammy, it was sweaty, it was smelly,
Hmm.
it was everything that you wanted a gym to be.
Right.
But then after COVID, and with all the sanitation
Hmm.
intact in place, it had a different aura about it. But when I first went there, I went there to scout the place out. And people thought
Hmm.
that, or the fighters thought I was just there with my phone wanting autographs.
Okay.
And after a while, they relaxed, and I said, "I'm just here to just look." And then the next time I went there with cameras, and I
Mm.
photographed them going through their paces. And the thing you noticed more than anything was how much they needed the contact and the connection from each other. Even though they
Hmm.
didn't each other, they had an outlet. They could now pursue their dreams and their goals.
Right.
And so they forgot about me, and that's one of the beauties
That's
of that
amazing.
style.
Yeah.
So I photographed a lot of pictures, which we narrowed down to 16 pictures.
Hmm.
And then we decided, through the help of John LaRue at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery,
Hmm.
to present these pictures. And we had a show called Larry Fink versus Gary Weeks, the boxing portfolios.
Right.
Larry Fink is an American photographer. I'm not sure if he's still alive, or he must be up in his late 80s now.
Hmm.
But he did a series of professional boxers from the States uh, in the 70s, 80s. So you had a young Mike Tyson, if you know boxing, and
Hmm.
a few others.
Little bit. Yeah.
And so my pictures were sort of squared off with his pictures. So we used one of the rooms as a sort of ring. We painted
Mm.
one side of the two walls a dark gray or a mid gray, and that was my side. I was the up and coming
Okay. That's so
student of boxing, and I
right.
was trying to take his title. The way I presented that work was on canvas, and so I stitched canvas so that it would be sort of a reflective of the canvas used in a boxing ring.
Right.
So I got out my sewing machine and I started adding grommets and lines and making all these canvases look
Mm.
plain. And as I said, that was a huge show. We had a lot of turnout because that was coinciding with the reopening of the Beaverbrook.
Right. Okay.
And that show sort of put me on the map, even though I was slightly on the map before,
Hmm.
because I would have never got the opportunity if I hadn't done good work before.
All of the other work before. Right.
And
So.
so I started getting representation in Fredericton. I'm very Fredericton based. I love the city, and the city's my home.
Mm.
And so I'm now represented by the Gallery on Queen
Right.
Story. And so with that as a sort of foundation for me, it made everything easy to keep doing what I'm doing. So
Sure.
I'm still a commercial photographer, but since 2022, I'm fully immersed in the fine art world and having more and more exhibitions.
So
And
can go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going
I
to
was
talk.
just I was just going to ask. So how have having representation opened things up for you? Just
Well,
so.
it sort of legitimizes you.
Okay.
It's weird because I'm self-taught.
Hmm.
And so I don't have the Bachelor of Fine Arts degree like a lot of
Right.
professional artists would do have. But having a photo gallery, an art gallery, sorry,
Hmm.
represent you, it makes some doors open very easily.
Okay. Because you've
And
been kind of doing like what you call the grind. You can kind of been doing that for yourself.
yeah, I'm doing that for myself, which is sometimes difficult.
Well, Yeah, that's the grind.
And I'll tell you about the grind because we've just come back from a grind,
Okay.
and so it makes it easier. But at the same time, we when it comes to Black artists in the fine art world, although we've been creating art for a long time, we're still relatively new.
Hmm.
And so one of the things we did, myself and a few colleagues, we decided to found the New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance.
Okay.
And that was in 2020, 2021 during COVID.
Mhm.
And it was just 7 individuals that got together and said, we want to start producing art, being treated as artists,
Mhm.
and start sort of knocking some of those barriers down that
Mhm.
have been up so long. So that being part of that organization and being a sort of go-to organization, we put together a few shows at Gallery on Queen, which we
Okay.
uh, wonderfully enjoyed and thankful.
Mhm.
Uh, that put a lot of our names on the map. And so from something that was grassroots, it's now not well established, but we're more established than we were in 2020
Right.
and 21. So having that organization, having the fact that I was now represented and I could bring other people
Mhm.
into Gallery on Queen,
Right.
it just made everything that much easier.
Well, that's amazing. I love hearing all of the succession of your story. And you said you had something else about the grind, or was that
Yeah,
what you were
well, the
just?
grind, apart from, well, just I'll talk about just a couple other shows.
Okay.
One show that I'm particularly pleased and proud of is last year I was allowed to do a solo show at the University of New Brunswick,
Right. Is that the Beachcomber show?
and that's the Beachcomber
Yes.
show.
Okay. I was going to
And
ask you about that one. Yeah.
that show was a fantastic one for me because
Mm.
that sort of used everything that I
Mm.
as an artist, as a photographer. Started off with me taking pictures, knowing that I had an idea, but not knowing what this idea was.
Mhm.
And so I took pictures at New River Beach. For the last couple of years, I've been a judge for their annual
Oh, the sand sculptures.
hand sculpture
Yeah.
exhibition. So one day I decided that I was going to get there early because I had visited New River Beach with friends during
Mhm.
COVID as part of the staycation.
Mhm.
And it was foggy and it was mysterious. And
Mm.
usually when it's a foggy beach, you go, no, why? But I
Right.
sort of
Like
loved it,
I
and
was going to say, you're a photographer artist, so you saw it differently.
yeah, I saw magic, and
Mm.
I went back there a couple of times trying to get that same
Mhm.
feeling, but it was either not foggy or not foggy enough or bright sunshine you want. So on this particular day, I took a camera and I decided to take pictures on the beach. Small individuals, big sky, very
Mhm.
different to what I normally take. And then I decided that I was going to go back a year or two later and take a series of pictures that I call still lives.
Mhm.
So I had the ocean to my back. I set up a small studio on the beach, and there's a rocky beach, and then there's a sandy beach. So the
Mhm.
rocky beach is a short walk or a short hike to get to.
Mhm.
So me and a friend, she was in her mid 70s at the time.
Mhm.
We decided to make it to this rocky beach, and I was in my element. The sun, the surf, people walking past on their hikes,
Mhm.
what I was up to.
Right.
But I knew that there was something that I was there to do,
Mhm.
although as I didn't quite understand it at the time.
Mhm.
Then I was given, so we fast forward, and I was given the opportunity to show some work that revolved around water.
Mhm.
And I thought, I got these pictures, and the story that's been speaking to me all the time, which I didn't
Mhm.
quite understand or didn't quite hear it, was the story of the Fundy, the Bay of Fundy, and
Mm.
those waterways being part of the triangular trade, where
Right.
it would bring slaves up from Africa,
Mhm.
exchange them for cotton and tobacco and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
They would go down to England. So we decided that this was the story that these pictures would tell. We were given the UMB Art Center, one of the galleries for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I filled that gallery with 2 tons of sand. And that sand was going to be reflective of the sand on the beach.
Right.
The work I was now showing was separated into 2 halves. The sails, which were reminiscent of reflective of the
Mm-hmm.
sails that the ships were
Mm-hmm.
using. They were all printed on canvas. And then there was the slabs. The slabs were a mixture of concrete, which was a form of sand. You need
Mm-hmm.
concrete, and epoxy resin, which was to emulate the water. And so basically, these images that were printed on fabric were laid in the epoxy bath after they'd been baptized on the beach. And again, this is where I wanted to show the human hand. There's a
Mm-hmm.
roughness about it. I would fray the edges. They were supposed to look like they were just roughed up.
Mm-hmm.
I achieved that, and it was a wonderful show for me because I included music for the first time. Uh,
Okay.
it was very there was a lot of sensuality going on, meaning
Mm-hmm.
piece for the senses visually,
Right.
and emotionally. And so that was my last year. That was a wonderful show for me to have, and it's
Wow.
a great time because it sort of made me grow up a little bit. Instead of wanting to take pretty pictures, which I'm good at,
Right.
I now wanted to take pictures with a little bit more of a backstory, a little bit more of a meaning, and tell stories. My photography, I always felt was good. I'm not sure if I'm great yet, but I know that I have many different ideas and many different styles. I don't tend to shoot in one way because I'm skilled at many different styles of photography.
Right.
I tend to use the story or the style that fits the story best for me.
Right. And you're an artist too. I mean, I know photographers are considered artists, but in the way that you use other elements in your photography and your storylines is pretty incredible.
Well, thank you, because I
Yeah.
feel there has to be another element to it. People
Yeah.
have been sort of sidelining photography for such a long time because it's becoming more and more
Mm.
universal. Everybody who's got a phone has a camera. And
Yeah.
so everybody now can take pictures. And that's always, and I love my phone and I love the camera,
Mhm.
but I use my phone as more of a notebook.
Right.
If I see something, I'll click it, and just by the mere clicking of it, it gives me
An
it
idea.
locks it in.
Wow.
And so, but to make the pieces one-off, it's where the sculpture now comes, the
Mhm.
hand gets involved.
So Gary, I want to ask you. I mean, thank you for sharing all of your history and all of your work and how you came to be, well, who you are. But what I'm curious, what's next for you? What are you
Well,
working on?
the next thing that we're working on is called the Still Here Initiative. It's an organization that me, Tanway McCarthy, his mother,
Mhm.
Dr. Mary McCarthy, Leah Mashur, and Jeannie Rediker,
Mhm.
5 of us decided that we would now tell local stories. It started
Mm.
off with Tandaway. Tandaway decided that he was going to find more out about his blackness, as he would say.
Okay.
And so his mother is a very well-known black
Mhm.
artist, black historian, and she's very well-known in the black community.
Mhm.
We brought each of our strengths on board. Hers for her knowledge base,
Mhm.
my photography, and Tandaway's poetry.
Right.
And we decided that we were going to find 15 Black New Brunswick families who can trace their roots back to the late 1700s, early
Oh my
1800s.
goodness. Wow.
And then we would photograph them, we would interview them,
Mm.
we would write poetry about them,
Mm.
and decide to put it all together in one sort of offering.
Right.
It started off small, where we were going to have a self-published book,
Mm-hmm.
small exhibition. But as the project started to grow, and as we visited each and every family, from the very first family, we came away thinking, this is magical, because the families opened up their hearts to us, and it was we would bother the family for no more than 2 to 3 hours. And when I say bother, I just mean we
Right.
we wouldn't be there for no more than 2 to 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
The families would create an event. So they would invite all of their family as much as possible along, and we would take portraits of every one of them.
Wow.
I would take a big, large group portrait,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would do a documentary style fly on the wall process of pictures.
Okay.
So it was a lot to do in a very short period of time. And as a photographer, you want time because your
Right.
business is fractions of a second.
Mm-hmm.
You want as much time as you possible. But we were disciplined enough not to do that. And then as it started growing, as more and more families started getting on board, we started talking about the project to others, and others started realizing that this project is bigger than
Mm-hmm.
me. And so we were invited last October, to go to Concordia University in Montreal
Right.
and speak to the Jaroslawski Institute about what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And then we spoke to other art historians and researchers, and they couldn't believe the amount of information that we were able to get from these families. Because
Right.
when you go there as academics, you tend to frighten people.
Mm-hmm.
People are not relaxed enough to show them their true selves.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did was we broke a bunch of barriers. And so as we're talking about it, I've got a good relationship with the Beaverbrook Art Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
we sit down one day and we speak to the curator, John LaRue. And John LaRue gives me a call late at night saying, come here tomorrow morning and show me what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, okay. And so I went there and I started sweating because he was looking at the work and going,
Mm.
And the thing about it is that sort of work is very different to what I normally do. Everything I do in a fine art setting is sculptural, it's beautiful, it's very refined and studied. This was a lot looser, and to get that level of looseness, so that you could see the families as they really are, is and so he looked at them and then went, we can have this as a show. And so it went from just a little small venue to now the Beaverbrook.
Right.
We're showing 174 portraits of mine. Everybody that we photographed in our travels will have a photograph presented to them on a mirrored material, and we're trying to make this big sort of chandelier type thing.
Oh, wow.
In the middle of it's called the Orientation Gallery in 2026.
Okay. So not okay.
At the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. And then we got the 15 family group portraits. These will be dotted around that gallery. And then we've got a whole range of the documentary style photos. So in all, we've got 200 to 300 pictures, which is a lot of pictures to show.
It is.
And it's slightly overwhelming, but we want it to be a hug. That once you're in that space, you're absolutely enveloped by blackness. And wherever you look, you'll see faces. Some faces you'll know, some faces you would have grown up with.
Mm-hmm.
But there will be faces everywhere.
Oh.
Spotted between these pictures are going to be poetry written by Tandaway.
Mm-hmm.
And the poetry will give you pauses, moments to reflect on our visits, because he's great at reflecting on what just happened, what we just experienced,
Hmm.
and written poetry to reflect that. And
Wow.
so we've got that. We've partnered with King's Landing, so we've got
Mm.
historical archival artifacts from them.
Okay.
We partnered with the provincial archives where they had a dearth of Black imagery. So
Mm.
the images that we're going to have, we're going to present them to the the provincial archives. So now they've got a big bumper stock of images that they can
Hmm.
use. We've also now partnered with the Goose Lane Publishing.
Oh,
And so now a book is being
book is
published,
being in the works.
and the book and the launch of the exhibition will coincide on August 1st, which is Emancipation Day in New
Mm.
Brunswick. The show will start around July 18th, but we're having a one-off festival where we're inviting all the families along.
Right.
And now, as a consequence of that, it's not been greenlit, but we're pretty sure it's going to happen. CBC are now going to be following this around and following our story for the year leading up to the one-off exhibition, the one-off.
This is incredible.
It feels big, and so that leads us to where we were over the last few days. We just got back from a visit to
Okay.
Ontario,
Right.
and we went there with the idea that we were going to sit down with galleries and museums.
Hmm.
But the show will travel. We've already decided that the show will travel
Right.
with the Beaverbrook.
This is incredible.
One of the venues we're going to be going to is, hopefully, fingers crossed, is
Hmm.
the Art Windsor Essex Gallery.
Okay.
And so we sat down with the executive director there and we had a great conversation. We also spoke to Amherst Freedom Museum,
Mm.
spoke to the assistant curator there, and we'll probably have a book launch or a book signing there. And we started to realize through this project that how many stories that how the stories that we are telling are shared with the stories that are being told in Ontario, Nova
Hmm.
Scotia, uh, PEI, all these different provinces across the country.
Hmm.
So our story is pretty much a New Brunswick story, but it's
It's a universe. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I was just thinking while you were speaking, I thought how many other communities are going to want to tell their stories.
it's exactly that because
Mhm.
everybody has we're a nation of what do you call it incomers.
Hmm.
And so everybody has a story, and people have been here for hundreds of years.
Hmm.
And even though we keep saying it's not our country, it is our country.
Hmm.
And so I'm an immigrant,
Right.
and people I know are immigrants, and even those who've been here 200 years plus have
Hmm.
come somewhere. And the
Exactly.
indigenous community are building stories of their own, and we need
Yes,
to understand these stories and
we do.
with these stories.
That's incredible. I come from a family of immigrants as well, like probably 150 years ago,
Yeah,
125 years ago. I'm not good with that,
but
but
then from
yeah,
where
Lebanon.
exactly?
Yeah.
And there's been a Lebanese community
Hmm.
for a
Yeah,
while.
for a while. So there's stories there, but I love what you're doing, and I think I mean, it's so important to hear these stories, and so timely because I think, unfortunately, before now, I talked with Jeremy Dutcher's mom as well. She was on another podcast that I did about, how the stories are now because she does a language school,
Yeah,
and how the timing of all of this now, people are finally willing to see, listen, and hear what all of the immense history of all
well,
of these people, and
that's
why now, you know
I'm not sure if it needed a great supposed catastrophe like the pandemic
mm,
to allow people
probably.
to sit back and say, okay, now we want to listen. Because we were sitting at home and all our riches, all our wealth meant nothing at that point in time.
This is true. You're correct.
So I'm thinking we always have an expression, whether it was tokenism or merit. And me and Tandaway, we go back and forth a lot of times, and we felt that at first it could have been tokenism, where they wanted to tell stories because every other province was telling stories. And to some degree, that I feel that was true, even though you hate to say it. But now we feel that we've crossed that bridge because we've stood the test of time. We're not just a pandemic story anymore. Now mainstream story. And now we've got something that we want to share, and we've got something viable that people would love to listen to. We're doing work that the academics haven't been able to do to the degree that we're doing it. And we did it in a short period of time, and we tried to keep everybody on board and everybody happy, which I think we achieved. But like you say, there's stories. Every community has a story. Every community with the right amount of education or the right amount of talented individuals, they can tell that story.
Well, congratulations. Honestly, I think this is, and thank you, because I think this is so important. I'm excited for this. And I think it's going to be, as you were saying, it kept growing. I think it's going to continue to grow. And who knows,
Well, it's platforms like this, which I like to say thank you for allowing me to talk. Platforms like this which allow us to get the word around. Because all it needs to do is reach one person out of our circles to then reach another person.
So when this gets on YouTube, you tell all your friends to subscribe.
I will, because as soon as I get that video, I'm posting it on my networks.
Yes, yes, definitely. So I really appreciate you talking to me today, and thank you for being so open.
You're welcome.
And was there anything else on the horizon? I mean, that was such a big project. I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about.
I was just recently by the Multicultural Council.
Okay.
To do a series of pictures on gender-based violence. So I paired up with one of the coordinators of the programs, and we did some portraits, which were, I thought, they're stylized, but they involve face paint and makeup, and again, very different to what some of the other work I did. And that's going to be coming out soon, and we're trying to make that a bigger event than it's what we initially thought it could be.
Right.
And so now the pictures are still in the production stage. They still need to be finished.
Right.
But they will open up another discussion, which I hope will advance people's awareness. And then sorry, just going from something so deep to something less deep, but Tandaway and myself were involved in the Maritime Edit.
Okay.
And the Maritime Edit, Tandaway is their cultural correspondent, and I'm brought along to do a portrait of someone in the Black community. Okay. And so we were talking about it the other day, we're maybe 10 issues strong now. Okay. And we photographed, our last person that we photographed was Dee Hernandez. She's an EC. Oh, yes. Cuban born. Yes. Cuban born. That's amazing. So we were asked, I was in America at the time over Christmas. Tandaway was in America visiting his mother in Florida. We were asked if we could do it. We were like, no, we're both away. But then we were asked if we could. And so as soon as we got back to Canada, we did a 4-hour drive up to Dalhousie. In the freezing cold, we had Dee Hernandez standing by the lighthouse in sadly a quiet town now, which was once a thriving.
What's the name of the town again?
Dalhousie.
Oh, Dalhousie, right. Okay.
And so we photographed her and then took a 4-hour drive back. Never before would I have driven that much in a day. But now I feel I'm a little bit more Canadian because of it. Yes. And so Dee will be in the next issue of the Maritime Edit. That's amazing. Some really interesting people. again, very different to what my fine art work is, my work that I'm doing with gender-based violence, and the work I do with vets and people in Fredericton.
Well, Gary, I'm so glad that you came here. I don't know that the community would be the same without you. And what a incredible amount of stories that are coming from this region. I mean, who would have known? You know, like you coming here, you're doing this work, telling these stories. I don't know. I think it was for a reason.
Well, that's what I feel. I feel local stories need to be told. We
And
can't.
they're so rich.
Yeah, there's
It's
such a
incredible.
history. If we talk
Yeah.
about my family being here for 150 plus years,
Mhm.
they didn't all come here and sit down in a corner and wait for things to happen.
No, no.
Experienced life, they experienced and they created new life, but with still connections to back
Yeah.
home, wherever that is.
And maybe you just given me a couple of ideas there. So who knows who I'll talk to next. But I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. Do you have a website? How can people find you?
I'm I'm on Instagram at Gary S. Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my website, which is weeksphotography.com, which is slow. It's an old site, which I don't upgrade.
Okay.
And I'm in the process of just getting funding for my fine art bespoke website.
Okay.
And so that should be up if all the money comes through. That should be up in the summertime, hopefully.
So Gary, I have a couple questions that I ask all my guests, so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to ask them to you now. Is that okay?
That's fine.
I think I probably already know the answer just to a couple of them, but one of them is, what makes you feel most alive?
So just waking up every day, knowing that I am able to do what I need to do. Like I say, one of the sadnesses for me right now is that me and my kids, my 3 daughters, are slightly estranged.
Oh, okay.
So I'm working for them, even though we're not together at the moment.
Right.
But yeah, I'm living for the moment.
Okay. Another question is just kind of related. This title of the podcast is The Soul's Kitchen. So I'm having conversations with people who are living their soul's desire. But for me, my background, I used to own a cafe, as you know. So it's like, what's your ingredient for life? So it doesn't have to be, what's your favorite ingredient?
Well, I just celebrated a birthday.
Okay.
Not a milestone birthday, but I'm born on Valentine's Day.
Okay.
And so my thing was from my birthday that I said, I'm going to continue this journey in love.
Oh, that's amazing.
In love with everything, because we've had so much hate, so much turmoil, so much sadness over the last few years. And I've taken a lot on my shoulders. And during that bit, I felt that great weight of, I realized that I was a people person then, and I need people in my life. And although we had family and everything, just human contact I missed. And so now for the next however many years I've got left, I'm going to try and walk in love. Don't bring arguments to me because they will be a waste of time.
Wow. Okay.
And just enjoy everybody.
Right. Well, that's amazing. I love that. And one last question: what's the biggest lesson you think you've learned in life?
Stay humble.
Stay humble. All right. Well, on that note, Gary, we'll call it a day. I really thank you. It's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much.
And good luck with these. These are wonderful. And getting people to speak about who they are. We need more people like that because, we're getting all of our information from celebrities.
This is true. Not the real people with so many important things. Thank you again today for being so open, Gary. I appreciate it.
I really do too. So
all right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Just hang on for a second there. Thank you.